Hello everyone, welcome to our best practice webinar for today. We're going to be going through how to manage your internal work using Accelo. My name's Adam. I'll be hosting today's webinar. I work here in the implementation area here at Accelo, and I'm joined today by Saga, who will be presenting the content, and he's another member of our implementation success team. So looking at the agenda for today, we're going to kick off with a bit of an overview of, what are the types of internal work we've seen clients use. We're going to go through and, take you through how to set that up, looking at areas such as internal client statuses, different work types as well. Once we've gone through and set that up, we'll take you through on how you can actually report and use that internal work best. We're expecting, about 15 to 20 minutes worth of content, and then we'll have about 5 to 10 minutes of questions at the end. So as always, feel free to send your questions through using Zoom's Q&A function, and we'll get to them at the end. I'm now going to pass you over to Saga, who's going to take you through it.
Thank you, Adam. So again, by design, Accelo is meant to be a professional services automation tool for your client communications and client work. But a lot of times what goes missing in a lot of our setup and training is focusing on our internal work that we found a lot of our clients are interested in tracking. So we'd like that one source of truth. So again, in Accelo, you'd ideally like to track all your work utilization and timesheets for all the individuals on your team. And from an individual perspective, you'd like, say to your admin team to know all the time that you're spending on those internal activities, which is maybe the reason why your billable hours are down for the week. So again, for this session, we're looking to bring in a lot of other types of work that you might do for your team. So to kind of separating it out into 6 different parts, just as examples. So the admin team will want to track how much time is spent in weekly meetings, maybe onboarding new employees. So for example, we had a new employee join our team. We created an internal project for all the different phases of her, being up to speed. You might want to track how much time you're spending on accounting or any notes for the accounting side. A marketing team is, could use Accelo to track all of their different email campaigns, advertising campaigns, and magazines. Maybe as owners of businesses or managing individuals that might be a part of marketing teams, you can track, how much time are they spending, where are we at, what are they spending their time on, using Accelo as well. So for example, our marketing team can go into Accelo and use our projects module to send out, different emails as per this webinar. You have a website for tracking, maybe all the new blog posts that you'd like to do, and maybe having a task for all the different topics for that blog post. A lot of our clients maybe go through a redesign sometime within their life cycle of maybe upgrading that website. Or, for us, we have a list of different tasks for new help pages or upgrading former help pages that we'd like to assign out to different members of our success team to work on to see what's been complete and how much time have we spent each week on it. From a project management perspective, you might be wanting to improve your processes or build internal resources for your team. And we can track the different phases of building that internal resource and rolling it out to that team, or even working on building a new service offering. Your developers and IT staff can be, again, tracking your new products or new features that you might be building for your different systems that you might be selling to your clients, or tracking bugs and improvements that are not necessarily client-facing, but just, something that you'd like to track. We also have an idea of API docs. A lot of our clients use tracking their internal work, in other words, our API docs that they provide to their clients. And then IT, setting up new equipment for your internal staff, improving your Accelo configurations and internal help guide. So for example, if you're coming onto Accelo now, you can create an internal Accelo project to track how much time you're spending on implementing Accelo for your team and what that cost is. Okay? Again, feel free to use that Q&A at any time, but we're going to be going through a to-do list. And how can we set up your system best for tracking this internal work over time? So the first thing is creating an internal company status, so we can filter by this internal status on your list of companies to see what are the different internal companies there. Setting up an internal type and progressions. Set up internal company or companies. So 2 examples, Accelo internal versus Accelo internal success, Accelo internal marketing, Accelo internal development. Set up internal projects and set up filters and the schedule tool we may touch on, which is relatively new. You may not seen it enough here on our blog. But anyways, as we like to do in this webinar, we'd like to go through it live with you on how to set these things up. And we've already set up a majority of it already, just so you can kind of see as a reference for the sake of time. But we want to make sure that you know how you can do it. And we're always happy to assist. But otherwise, if you just give it one moment, I'm going to pause my screen and bring up our Accelo in a test deployment that we use. Great. So now we're bringing up our Accelo test deployment that we're going to be discussing a lot of the to-do list. Okay, I did see your question. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. So as we go through, the first thing we want to do is set up that internal company status. So if you hit that top left module button, I'm going to go down to configurations to bring up my admin configurations. Something to note is, setting up these customizations with these different statuses and types, this is a premium feature in our account. You can always have your different companies under active. You just have to name them differently. But again, customizing these business processes is a premium feature for our account. I'm then going to go to companies and contacts. So under companies and contacts, I'm going to go under company progressions. So underneath this company status progressions, for those that haven't been in the screen so far, this is where we can customize what's on the top side of any company record. So if we pull up any company record, let's just see what, where does the status kind of push over to. So if I'm pulling up this company record, what you should be able to do is what part of that life cycle is this company that you're working with at a given time. So by default, your account may have lead, active, inactive, vendor, and partner. Again, through those premium features, you can go ahead and add in additional statuses and additional progressions to add in. So what we'd like to do is, again, create a new status, say internal, add in a standing. So again, we can have a lot of custom titles up here, but we can have a standing, which is how our system recognizes it that. You can have different colors, and start equals yes. This is kind of key for being able to add in a project underneath that status. So I've already done so. I've already added an internal, and I've also said any can go to internal. For those that have already using Accelo and you'd like to add in this company or already have an internal company, you can just add in this progression to move them over from, say, active to internal. Okay? All I'm doing here is I'm hitting new progression. So I'm adding another workflow. So think of another stage within that life cycle, and then going from, say, active to internal. Or as I did it, I did any. Okay? So now that we've added in this internal status, when we go through and we add in a company, we're able to select that internal status. Okay, I'm going to pull it up and we'll see that in just a few moments. But otherwise, from an additional kind of configuration standpoint, we'd like to bring up our different types of projects to start with. Once you click on projects in your admin configurations, then you can go to progressions and fields. So if we click on that, we'll be brought to our list of different project types. Again, for those on premium, you may know that each type allows for different custom fields as well as different progressions on this right-hand side. Now I added one in for the type of internal. So an internal project type. So when you create a project, you can select internal and maybe have different progressions as per your internal projects. And that's about it. So in terms of you have your company status, you can have different types of projects. So again, the idea with setting up this type is allowing you to filter your list of projects by that type of internal. Okay. You can do the same thing for tickets and same thing for retainers if you'd like to track, maybe work and report on it from a week-to-week basis. Okay. So after we've set up that status and we've set up that type for projects, we will need to set up a company record. So you can go in and say set up Accelo internal, and then This is what we did at first. And then we realized a lot of us, have a lot of different projects that we'd like to track per division part of our team, and our team is growing. So we ended up adding in, say, Accelo internal success for our success team. So we can separate out those projects from, say, success to our marketing team to, the admin members of our team. You'd want to select the status of internal. So you have a status of internal. So when you're looking at a given company record, we can look at internal. So on the bottom, I think this comes to the question in the chat that we couldn't add our company and email to the Accelo database as a client because it might cause conflicts. So what will cause a conflict if you go ahead and add in, say, Sagar Gupta. This is what we don't want to do. We don't want to have a user added in as a contact in the system. What this basically does is it captures emails from your internal staff to internal staff. Right? That's a big kind of security no-no, and a lot of times we're trying to prevent that from the start. And if you know about our email capture, we do not bring in internal emails. But this could allow that to happen because we consider that individual as now a contact. And again, we bring in emails for your clients and contacts. So what I'd like to do is not even have my personal email. So I won't want to have sagar.gupta@gmail.com, because what that allows me to do is, so for example, I might be new at the company and I may have applied to Accelo with sagar.gupta@gmail.com. I don't want those conversations to be brought up or say an offer letter sent to that individual brought up. So if you have any contacts in Accelo, we want to make sure that they're not your personal emails, like the personal email that you use kind of most frequently, or your work email as well as a contact. What you can do, and this is what I did, I put in alsagartest@gmail.com. I created an extra email for Gmail for this context. It also allows me to kind of test some, ideas or what a note is. How does an email look to this client if I want to test my email signature in Accelo? So I'd recommend maybe not creating a Gmail account, but at least having one of your test Gmail accounts or older Gmail accounts to add it in, or you can even just keep it plain and just write example. Okay. So again, to answer your question, just don't use your personal email address nor your work email address as a contact email. Okay. Otherwise, you can just hit save company. Or not, because we already have a few companies already there. Which brings us to the next point. So we set up that internal company status, and we set up those types of internal work. So how can we utilize that? So we're in a deployment called Ugly, which is why it says Ugly Internal Success. But I can go and hit that top left module button and go to companies. So we notice on this company it says internal, but you may have different divisions for your team. So you may have marketing, success, and such. You can then go ahead and select a filter for internal. So these are your internal records. Ugly internal and Ugly internal success. And if you remember from the PowerPoint, we can go through and have, say, Ugly internal success, Ugly internal marketing, if you'd like to separate it out. From a best practices standpoint, say if you're a small business, say under 10 people, having one company record might be sufficient. But if you're, over 50 people, it might be a good idea to separate that out so you can track how much time you're spending on internal work across multiple parts of your team. Okay. What I also did was I set up a shared filter. And for those that are not familiar, once you filter this list down, you can save that and write in, say, internal company records. And you can keep it personal, which is no is it's not shared, and yes is it's shared. So what that comes up is if you go and hover over the save filter, we can look at your company filter for internal, or you can look at internal work here. So same idea, let's look at projects. So we set up an internal project type, and I can click into this list to be brought directly to my internal work that I might be doing. So just a few examples, we have these given projects here. They're all added in underneath that internal project type. So you go look at projects, and we're adding in a project as part of your internal processes. We want to make sure that we're choosing internal. Again, our default config, default and automated. are there, but we also have an internal status that we can add in. But let's see an example. So for example, for this webinar, there's some time of prep that needs to be complete. So I'm clicking into that internal project. And we're looking at it, again, from a best practice standpoint. How can we set up this project? And what would be like an example of doing so? So we have this best practices webinar for internal work. You have prep, and we have the webinars. So for example, Adam can be in charge of preparing for the webinar, and it can have assigning out who's going to be in charge of it on our success team. So Adam will be the manager of that milestone. The idea, the slide prep, deployment prep, and outreach email. Again, there's different individuals, so 3 different total individuals, and there can be log time for each one. So we've logged 20 minutes of non-billable time across this task. Now, another example is, we completed webinar, number 1 this morning. So I had to wake up early, and I came in, say, at 8 a.m. The end time was around 8:30, 30 minutes, and I can type in what I did. So something as simple as that, and I'm going to change the status to completed. It's save log. And there you go. So we're tracking, how much of that time did I do for that webinar. So you can see that I spent 30 minutes on that. And there's 1 hour of time. As well as I can go through and say, I've started webinar 2. So from an admin perspective, let's say Jeff, our CEO, wants to see, okay, so how are these webinars going? How much time are we spending on it? And maybe what's that return on investment? Like how many people are showing up, and we can kind of create a report at the end of this webinar. You can have maybe a custom field saying, what was that return on investment for that project? And over time, we can track, are these internal efforts having that return? But otherwise, again, from setting up this project, you notice you have those milestones, you have those tasks, but we want to do one thing in particular that kind of sets these projects out from other projects that you may have. So if you edit that project plan, that first line item is important because we have that budget for that given project. And for internal projects, we want to make sure that it's non-billable. Okay, so again, we want to make sure that's non-billable. And just a quick recap, I got here by going to the project plan for a given project, editing that left-hand side, clicking budget, and then editing this. So fixed, calculated, and non-billable. So again, we want to make sure that this is non-billable project. So anytime you log against this will not count towards a individual's, say, billable time that they spend. Same idea for tickets. So if I pull up any given ticket, I don't necessarily have a ticket set up just yet for internal work, but I'll show you how to at least make it non-billable. Okay, so if I pull up any given ticket, say service request, on that left-hand side, we can automate tickets that are under service request to be non-billable, or whatever that type is, say internal. We can automate it to be time only, no rate. And if you have premium, you can add in that additional ticket type of internal and just have time only, no rate as the automated rate for that ticket. Now, when we use tickets versus projects, this is kind of a common question that we kind of answer during implementation. So when we use tickets, it's for more short-term work. We don't have to assign it out to multiple individuals. We don't need like a full-on project plan. Now, this webinar preparation is kind of on that border of, should we use a ticket rather than a project? Personally, I like to use projects to kind of see it all laid out. I also like the Insights tab for projects. So, you can use projects or a ticket if it's like maybe a short term, but we need to update the logo, and you can assign out one of your team members to go ahead and do so. But otherwise, we can go to that timesheet report to see something else. So how much time have we spent on internal work, or how much time has an individual spent on internal work? So for internal success, we can track, how much time was spent for that individual for, say, best practices webinar. And we kind of listing out all the different internal projects that there might be. Okay, but as well as all your other projects, we can see how much time was non-billable time was spent. It doesn't affect your bill amount of hours. And if I did have a cost rate here, I can say, what was that cost of the company? Again, that's an admin only column, that cost, and if you have financial visibility for amount. But for an admin perspective, you can track how much was that cost to the company for Sagar to work on that, best practices webinar. Okay, how much was that time to say, if we go from a company viewpoint or a project viewpoint, how much was that total cost to the company? Again, if you had the cost rates added in, which we don't in this test deployment, for that individual to work on internal work. Okay. So again, we want to track that return on investment to see if it's worth it to say continue doing best practices webinars. And so far we've seen it's pretty much a tremendous return on investment on our end, which is why we'll continue doing these. Okay. So again, feel free to start asking any questions on the Q&A functionality, as I mentioned. But otherwise, we're going to look at just those filters just one more time for projects especially. So just a quick recap. Again, you can filter your list. So imagine you have 32 projects right now. You can filter your list to say maybe your active projects or your planned projects and so on. But what we can do is also have project type. So project type and maybe active internal projects. You might have another status for backlogged internal projects. Like for example, me and Adam always discuss how can we improve our implementation process and have a lot of backlogged projects. When we have time, we can pull a project up and start working on it. So again, you can have internal work or internal work backlogged, internal work active. Kind of take that one step further. And again, that also translates well to other types of projects that you might have for your client-facing projects. Okay. And we are releasing a schedule tool that's coming up relatively soon. So I'm just going to show you just a quick, 2-second look at that. And pull it up. If you just give me 1 second. So this is currently in our beta, and the idea is we can track all of our different kind of work across different days or different weeks, and how much time has been logged and how much time has been resourced out. So we can create a list of maybe all of our internal work, or we can kind of just use a filter for, say, internal work. Okay. So we can click into those different filters and bring up all the different projects that we might be working on an internal basis over time. So we can track, say, for the best practices webinar, which actually has some tasks and milestones. We can track, what's been complete, how much time has been logged across each one. We can see this over time, and you can kind of also, maybe this is the priority for this week, and you can kind of shift this up to the top. Again, this is still our beta. Otherwise, it would be fine underneath the help section, schedule section, when it's going to be released. But I highly recommend taking a look at this. If you look at our blog, you can see kind of the beta version of this. And there's a lot of just cool things that are coming through with this. For example, clicking into these items, but we'll leave that for our dev team to release soon. But otherwise, I think, Adam, there are some questions, if you want to bring it over in your end.
Yeah, thanks, Sagar. We have had some questions come through, and if there's any other questions out there, please feel free to send them through. First question, Sagar, we have is, what is the advantage of setting up multiple internal companies over one internal company with multiple internal projects against them?
Yeah, great question. So as I was saying kind of before, for a small business, say under 10 people, it may make sense to have, say, one internal company, say Accelo internal. And that's what we started with Accelo, is we only had one internal company record. What we found was our Accelo success team and our Accelo marketing team, there's a lot of different projects that might be working from an internal basis. We want to see that separation in terms of when we look at our list of work for that given company. So we go to that work tab for that given company. We hover over this. What I mean by that is if I click into a company, I can go to that work tab. We only see success projects, or we only see marketing projects. And the easy solution is just having different company records. And from a timeshare perspective, you can track, success team activities versus marketing team. There'll be two different line items with two different companies and all the projects within it. So again, small business, under 10 people, you might not just, one is probably sufficient. When you get kind of larger than that, then you may have different divisions or different teams. And that's when I recommend having multiple internal company records. But remember, never have yourself as a contact, your personal or your actual work email.
Thanks. Next question we have is, are there any circumstances which one might want to enter contacts for the internal company or internal company like divisions?
So maybe if you might have an internal company, maybe vendor that you might be working with, and you may want to create like a privacy setting there, but I'd probably just keep those individuals as their own company record. Yeah, I really can't think of a reason. There might be about, contacts underneath an internal record that you'd want to keep. Unless I'd say is if you don't have particular individuals in Accelo and you track that email communication in the system, that might be one way, but I really can't think of any other reason why. There's more issues that can happen if we make a mistake on that part. So I'll probably say almost a hard no on that.
All right, another question we have, and this is a bit of a scenario, but the client here has some internal project activities, the example given approved pre-sales work that they want to show up as utilization, so coming up in the utilization dashboard, but not having a dollar value. Is setting the task to be billable but $0 the best way to do that?
So actually, you can set up different milestones to be not billable too. So if you go up in any given project, the project itself can be billable, but this particular milestone can be not billable. So that's probably, the best bet is having maybe the non-billable kind of style work, part of a milestone that's not billable. So if you go edit this project plan, and say we have this overall project is, say, a fixed price or calculated price of what's coming in from underneath it. These milestones itself can be not billable. So again, the overall project can be billable, but maybe particular milestones are not billable for those, internal activities that may need to be done, like research and such, that you don't want to bill the client for. Now, something important to note is you might have a lot of internal activities like researching a specific company. Like for example, a client may sign up with maybe through your form, and you might have an individual that's kind of researching the company before it goes to the sales team. That will always be non-billable because any activities logged against sales will be non-billable. So again, something important to keep in mind that we cannot have billable activities logged on a sale. Your billable activities will be projects, tickets, and retainers.
Great, and those will be shown up in the utilization dashboard.
Correct. Your non-bill, so in your utilization dashboard, for those that are maybe unfamiliar with it, I'm hovering over dashboard on the top and clicking on utilization dashboard. But if I bring that up, you can filter that utilization dashboard by billable and not billable time. You see right here, you have billable and not billable time. I like to usually keep auto off. So as of right now, there's say 2 hours of billable or non-billable activity on July 24th. And again, it'll be different colors, so billable versus not billable. And you can also export this utilization dashboard out. If you've never seen this before and it's not showing them under dashboards, this is only an admin member feature as well as a premium feature. And yeah, Matt, I think Adam just mentioned he'll follow with you offline, but along the lines of, again, we're bringing in a lot of email correspondence if you have a contact in the system with your personal or work. So again, the user record should have that. So if you pull up that user record, I mean, this is another test deployment, should have your actual work address, say sagar.gupta@accelo.com, but any contact in the system should not have your work or personal address, because then the email capture rules are a bit different. Okay. Any other questions? We have a few minutes before we keep moving forward.
Cool, and we'll just go back to the presentation while we're waiting for any other ones. So a bit of a look forward to the next best practice webinar. So in 2 weeks' time, on Thursday, On top of that, for this webinar here, this webinar we made available to everyone. The recording will be available up on our blog at accelo.com resources/blog, or on a new section on the website, which I'll paste into the chat in a second, where you can find all the recordings from our previous webinars, and in a few days' time, the recording of today's webinar. On Thursday, August 10th at 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Pacific time, we will have the next best practice webinar, focusing more on the ticketing side of things and around service level agreements, so SLAs as they're commonly called in the tech industry. We'll be taking you through how to set them up and using due date goals to drive that, tracking key metrics on service level agreements, such as response time, and then an overview performance for those SLAs, how many have been met versus how many have been violated on a per ticket basis. So look out for that, and if you're interested with that, we definitely want to see you join us again in the future. And as always, we've always liked to hear future suggestions for best practice webinar topics, because we can definitely take them into consideration and perform webinars on that in the future. So appreciate everyone's time today for joining us. And we'll leave the chat open for a little bit longer, so you can record those links down. But yeah, again, appreciate you joining us today, and we hope to speak to you again in the future.